So when I was looking at Facebook, I noticed that some stories do a lot better on Facebook than others, and that people were finding it very easy to click like on I just ran a marathon or I just baked this awesome cake, but that the stories like the genocide in Darfur enters its 10th year weren't getting so many likes. And in a world where the Facebook algorithm shows the stories that get lots of social love to more people and shows the stories that don't to less people, what does that mean? Does that mean that we don't find out about important but unpleasant things that are happening? Mark Zuckerberg, a journalist, was asking him a question about the news feed. And the journalist was asking him, why is this so important? And Zuckerberg said, a squirrel dying in your front yard may be more relevant to your interests right now than people dying in Africa. And I want to talk about what a web based on that idea of relevance might look like. When I was growing up in a really rural area in Maine, the internet meant something very different to me. It meant a connection to the world. It meant something that would connect us all together. And I was sure that it was going to be great for democracy and for our society. But there's this kind of shift in how information is flowing online. And it's invisible. And if we don't pay attention to it, it could be a real problem. So I first noticed this in a place I spend a lot of time, my Facebook page. I'm progressive politically, big surprise, but I've always gone out of my way to meet conservatives. I like hearing what they're thinking about. I like seeing what they link to. I like learning a thing or two. And so I was kind of surprised when I noticed one day that the conservatives had disappeared from my Facebook feed. And what it turned out was going on was that Facebook was looking at which links I clicked on. And it was noticing that actually I was clicking more on my liberal friends' links than on my conservative friends' links. And without consulting me about it, it had edited them out. They disappeared. So Facebook isn't the only place that's doing this kind of invisible algorithmic editing of the web. Google's doing it too. If I search for something and you search for something, even right now at the very same time, we may get very different search results. Even if you're logged out, one engineer told me, there are 57 signals that Google looks at. Everything from what kind of computer you're on, to what kind of browser you're using, to where you're located, that it uses to personally tailor your query results. Think about it for a second. There is no standard Google anymore. And the funny thing about this is that it's hard to see. You can't see how different your search results are from anyone else's. But a couple of weeks ago, I asked a bunch of friends to Google Egypt and to send me screenshots of what they got. So here's my friend Scott's screenshot. And here's my friend Daniel's screenshot. When you put them side by side, you don't even have to read the links to see how different these two pages are. But when you do read the links, it's really quite remarkable. Daniel didn't get anything about the protests in Egypt at all in his first page of Google results. Scott's results were full of them. And this was the big story of the day at that time. That's how different these results are becoming.
Now, wait. Explain that again. I mean, that is astounding. So you go in, the uprising is happening in Egypt. Right. In fact, today there's a mass protest in Tahrir Square. They're protesting the military council and other issues. So if I look and someone who likes to travel look, they may not even see a reference to the uprising?
That's right. I mean, there was nothing in the top 10 links. And what actually the way that people use Google, most people use just those top 3 links. So if Google isn't showing you sort of the information that you need to know pretty quickly, you can really miss it.
It's not just Google and Facebook either. this is something that's sweeping the web. There are a whole host of companies that are doing this kind of personalization. Yahoo News, the biggest news site on the internet, is now personalized. Different people get different things. Huffington Post, Washington Post, New York Times, all flirting with personalization in various ways. And where this moves us very quickly toward a world in which the internet is showing us what it thinks we want to see, but not necessarily what we need to see. As Eric Schmidt said, it'll be very hard for people to watch or consume something that has not, in some sense, been tailored for them. So I do think this is a problem. And I think if you take all of these filters together, if you take all of these algorithms, you get what I call a filter bubble. And your filter bubble is kind of your own personal, unique universe of information that you live in online. And what's in your filter bubble depends on who you are, and it depends on what you do. But the thing is that you don't decide what gets in. And more importantly, you don't actually see what gets edited out.
We've never seen technology like what the scenario we're in right now. This little black mirror that we carry around in our pockets, the smartphones, that's all you. That's all about you and your preferences and the websites you want to look at. And we become insular, we become very intolerant of others. The technology that we carry with us and that we are consuming at record rates right now encourages entitlement and encourages a lack of respect of other people's boundaries.
The screen culture makes people look within and not to look outside. So when I'm using my smartphone and I'm being sent instant messages and I'm being communicated to, it's about me. And people can say that's great for personalization. That's how I want it. I want to customize my whole life. But in fact, we're internalizing a lot of things. If I think about me, then most likely I will neglect my children. I will neglect my partner. I will neglect my workplace because it's about me and my interactions and the instantaneous communications that take place. There's always a danger in that, in ignoring your neighbor, in a lack of collective awareness. It's about insular things. What you're doing is removing your ability to think, removing your ability to meditate and be peaceful about things because you're constantly being bombarded by messages which are relevant and irrelevant. You're constantly thinking that these are more urgent than the baby crying in the next room who requires milk or food. And the screen culture just propagates itself. So in order for me to internalize my communications and look down and keep texting and keep messaging back, I also impose the same culture on my children because I just tell them to go and look at the TV for a little while longer. Go onto the internet, search some more things, go onto, playground and look at some music. So I am spreading this mimicry. And so when my senses are enveloped and it's about me and my communications, it's not about my children, it's not about my partner, it's not about my workplace, it's about me. And I think there's a great danger in trust within society, in building relationships with one another, or a lack of building when we are concerned about the me.
The me has been a target of corporate power for a long time. Advertising after the Second World War changed into instilling desires and manipulating the masses to want things and see the world in a certain way. From where the computer and the internet originated, this is in hyperdrive of the world of the screen culture. where not only the convergence of technologies has amplified the power and influence of corporate voice, the screen culture provides a centralised mechanism of social control, pretending to be freedom and democracy.
We tend to think about the internet as this sort of medium where anybody can connect to anyone. It's this very democratic medium. It's a free-for-all, and it's so much better than that old society with the gatekeepers that were controlling the flows of information. Really, that's not how it's panning out. And what we're seeing is that a couple big companies are really, most of the information is flowing through a couple big companies that are acting as the new gatekeepers. These algorithms do the same thing that the human editors do. They just do it much less visibly and with much less accountability.
And with a level of fine-tuning and individual customization never before possible.
They have a lot of the same dynamics that are driving what they show people and what they hide from people as the old media did. How these things are architected have huge consequences that are political.
The filter bubble puts you at the centre of what seems like a vast world of connectivity and relevance. But really, you're in a walled information garden, a holding cell of two-way mirrors, a giant echo chamber. What happens to our communities, our relationships, the culture, if we're all walking around in mirror cocoons with this hyper-individualism, this lack of collective awareness?
There's this thing called confirmation bias, which is basically our tendency to feel good about information that confirms what we already believe. And you can actually see this in the brain. People get a little dopamine hit when they're told that they're right, essentially. And so, if you were able to construct an algorithm that could show people whatever you wanted, and if the only purpose was actually to get people to click more and to view more pages, why would you ever show them something that makes them feel uncomfortable, makes them feel like they may not be right, makes them feel like there's more to the world than our own little narrow ideas.
And doesn't that, in effect, reinforce polarization within the society in terms of people not being exposed to and listening to the viewpoints of others that they may disagree with?
Right. I mean, democracy really requires this idea of discourse, of people hearing different ideas and responding to them and thinking about them. And, I come back to this famous Daniel Patrick Moynihan quote where he says, everybody's entitled to their own opinions, but not their own facts. It's increasingly possible to live in an online world in which you do have your own facts, and you Google climate change and you get the climate change links for you. And you don't actually get exposed necessarily. You don't even know what the alternate arguments are.
As we willingly pour our lives into the screens not only simply reflect this more of the same, it's strengthening corporate power, studying and analysing us inside this playpen, projecting into our individually targeted mirror world. We become the product of the consumer culture in totality.
There's a myth online that what we're doing is free. All that's happened is the place that revenue and value is extracted from us has been shifted.
Everything we do on a computer produces a transaction record. Right? Whether it's your laptop, whether it's your phone, whether it's an ATM machine, a toll booth, using your credit card, anything with a computer creates a transaction record. Right? Data is a byproduct of all of our information society's socialization. Increasingly, companies, computers are mediating all of our social interactions. And all of this data is increasingly stored and increasingly searchable.
And this is not only where social control centres from via a screen culture. It's where our value is ultimately extracted, turned into huge profits. And we think this is a good deal. We get so much for what we think is free. Think about your digital trails. What did you do today that involved a computer, a screen, your choice or not? The screens are always watching, saving. Example. When you browse the web, if a page has that like button, Facebook collects information about where you visit. Even if you're not on Facebook, the fact that you've been somewhere, Facebook knows, because the like button is there. And even if you don't click, it's been loaded from Facebook's servers. They know. And this information's used to shape your experience. The same is true for Google. The millions upon millions of websites that run Google Ads, or use Google Analytics software, or make use of any Google code, YouTube video, search buttons or images. If anything touches Google, Google knows. Think about all of those websites across the internet that these companies track, analyze, dominate and influence. How are our lives shaped by this? And how do we even know what's happening behind the scenes? We've become so sparing in our understanding of these technologies, these corporate interests, and how they wrap around our lives. What happens when I click this button?
The product online is not the content. The product online is you. The product online are the eyeballs looking at that content and as much information about how to influence the hands connected to those eyeballs as possible. You know, when you average kid today, you look at Facebook and you think, oh, look at this place. Facebook is here to help me make friends. Isn't that great? This is what this is for. Right? The distance between the user and the program is so great. We don't even know what the programs we're using are for. I talked to little Johnny, and he thinks that Facebook's there to help him make friends. Go to Facebook. What do you think they're talking about there? How are we going to help little Johnny make more friends? Deeper, lasting human relationships? No, they're thinking, how are we going to monetize Johnny's social graph? Right? How are we going to use big data to predict what Johnny's going to do and then sell Johnny's future to himself before he knows he's there himself?
What you have with the internet is a world on the one hand where a lot of young men, and they tend to be young men, spout a lot of nonsense, in my view, about democratization and egalitarianism and the opening up of everything. On the other hand, these young men are becoming infinitely rich and powerful.
Does this concern you? A convergence of corporate and state information power that old media empires could only dream of.
There is right now a huge, huge commercial push or corporate push to collect as much data as possible.
Right now, the default rule for Google and pretty much all of its competitors is that they keep everything. They have a log of every search made through Google since it started in the dorm rooms at Stanford. What you Google for defines you. A log of your searches on Google or any other search engine is practically the closest thing to a printout of the contents of your brain that we've ever seen. It indicates your political leanings, your religious leanings, your medical concerns, your sexual concerns, a vast array of sensitive data that in the past no one ever had.
Stare into the lights, my pretties. the society of the spectacle. Captive populations glued to screens, engineered with ever-increasing precision and insight.
The basic fundamental paradigm of advertising is called one-to-one marketing. That's what was made possible by the internet. I can know everything you do and I can reach you at any point. First, in the 90s, it was when you were in front of a computer. But now, because of the growth of the internet, and especially mobile devices, I can reach you 24/7. I can reach you and your friends, and I can target you, and I can engage in invisible digital behavior modification.
What sort of ministry of truth style world actually exists and would be perpetuated because of these huge, powerful engines? Engines that now have global reach and extensive influence over the information streams accessed by billions of people. Today, in the United States, more than 85% of adults get their news from social media, and 64% get news from only one source, usually Facebook. And so the behaviour modification doesn't just end with advertising, buying stuff, and how we'd be shaped into accepting a single news feed. The mega machine is much bigger than that. Corporate forces make huge profits, not only off the data about who we are and what we do, and by shaping us to be subservient consumers, and the cycle goes round and round. This manipulation is now done so well that politics has turned to using the very same methods. The billionaires that are behind politicians for corporate interest, who want us to vote a certain way or depend on a certain political outcome, not only donate huge amounts of money to individual candidates, but tap into the rich troves of digital data trails about each of us to generate extremely targeted campaigns.
The goal is to come up with an individual level statistical prediction of your likelihood of supporting their candidate or of casting a ballot at all.
Then they target you for ads. The Obama campaign is widely believed to have had the most sophisticated data mining operation.
And so they created basically a holistic system where they could not just target people, but figure out the best ways to target people.
It's my privilege to speak to you today about the power of big data and psychographics in the electoral process. Back in the days of Mad Men, communication was essentially top-down. That is, it's creative-led. Brilliant minds get together and come up with slogans like beans means Heinz and Coca-Cola is it, and they push these messages onto the audience in the hope that they resonate. Today, we don't need to guess at what creative solution may or may not work. We can use hundreds or thousands of individual data points on our target audiences to understand exactly which messages are going to appeal to which audiences way before the creative process starts.
We started to look at issue models, predicting which issues, social and political, appeal to which members of the target audience, which voters. We actually assigned different issues to every adult in the entire United States. We could then take these models and put them into a matrix where we can categorize people or segment them according to how they're likely to behave. Core Trump supporters, top right, may be more susceptible to a donation solicitation. Get out the vote, people who are going to vote Republican, but they need persuading to do so. Persuasion audiences, people who need shifting a little bit from the center towards the right. Once we've identified a segment, we can then sub-segment them by the issues that are most relevant to them and then start to target them with specific messages.
axiom, quantium, palantir. The companies behind the companies. The new age of the consumer culture that has also subsumed politics, run by data. Seemingly everything is run by data. Technocracy is the new democracy. These forces are the pervasive hidden hand in much of the online world, openly bragging about how they can manipulate us with scientific precision on a scale never before possible.
The commercial surveillance system that the advertisers have created all across the world is stunning and a cause for serious alarm. It threatens our civil liberties. It's about getting us to buy high interest rate credit cards, junk food, prescription drugs for illnesses we may or may not have, politicians who may or may not be good for us. That's what all this data is being used for. We have no access to this data. We have no ability to control this information. We can't challenge it. We can't correct it. So we've allowed the Googles and the Facebooks and the Yahoos to create invisible repositories of information about each and every one of us that they can use when it's close to us. So ultimately, it's not about just selling. It's about maybe the next evolution of capitalism, creating an undemocratic society.